a lot of hate against foreigner drivers.
Why
Because you want me to use quotations? They're just a dumb truck driver.
Okay, but you got to remember, I'm in the industry. You're not.
Welcome to the Truck Stop Show. My name is Ali. Today we're joined by Jeff, who has been in trucking industry for about 30 years. So we'll talk to Jeff and get to know about his journey in trucking. Jeff?
Hey, man.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. So tell us about your journey in trucking.
I started probably 29 years ago. I did my license through Markel in town, like a lot of guys did back then.
Correct. It was a school in Guelph. It's not there anymore, right?
I don't think it exists anymore,
Yeah.
at all. But like it was a good program. It was they had multiple trucks and multiple classrooms, and like it was a big outfit for then. And then I've worked for different carriers and around locally over the years. Mostly flatbed.
In my opinion, the most difficult work.
Well, but I mean, it's rewarding too. It was a lot of fun.
Most dangerous.
Well,
when you tie something and, Anyway, that's my opinion. Not for everybody.
Yeah, I've hauled a lot of steel.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. It's one of those things that you just get comfortable with doing. And I'm sure that a lot of guys, I'm not comfortable hauling cattle. So, I look at those guys and think that they're a different breed, but it's just what you get comfortable doing.
Right. Jeff, how did you get into trucking? Do you have any family background in trucking?
I have both my parents. They are fantastic human beings, but neither of them had anything to do with trucking. It had everything to do with my ex-wife and my ex-father-in-law. When I first met that man, we used to laugh because the first time I met him, I thought his balls clanked when he walked across the backyard. He was one of the toughest people I've ever met in my life, and still is to this day. But he was of a different generation. The young guys these days, and I mean, the young guys, don't get me wrong, they're out there doing the job right now. But the guys that are out there thinking that they're tough and they're doing it better than anybody else, they have no idea. They're running down the road in the most luxurious, most comfortable trucks built ever to date.
Correct.
They have inverters and microwaves and fridges and
AC, and heat.
My generation, we experienced a lot of that too. But the generation that I learned from, those guys literally were sitting on fucking park benches.
Oh yeah.
Milk crates.
Yes.
And
no cruise control.
No cruise control.
Yeah.
The last of the real cowboys. They did things. They seem to manage to get more done in an hour than I could in a day. It's really incredible. Some of the guys that I learned off, like tough human beings. One of them was in Texas and fell off an A-frame loading glass and broke his back, and he drove back to the border because he didn't have any U.S. medical insurance. My ex-father-in-law, he donated bone marrow and was back in the truck 4 or 5 days later.
Oh, wow.
And he took his brother with him because he thought he might need some help.
Here's a fact. These people we are referring to are probably the ones that started trucking in 50s, 60s, and even 70s. And then in North America, that was the time, right after World War II. These are baby boomers, right?
Yeah.
Actually, trucking got established. So these are the people who established trucking on this piece of land.
They're in like 75, 80-year-old right now.
Yeah, so they're the founders.
Yeah. Those guys, man, they when I hear guys talking about how they're doing it these days, I just kind of laugh to myself because they have no idea what real trucking is.
Right.
And listen, I'm not comparing myself to those guys either. They are built out of something different than I am.
Jeff, have these people been appreciated enough?
No. And they, a lot of them right now they're suffering a lot from the industry and some of the things that they've done over the years. Multiple divorces.
Huge. Family life in trucking, very few people can keep it together.
A lot of 4-day trips to the coast, and there's only one way you're getting to the coast in 4 days. So a lot of them, their livers are shot, their kidneys are shot.
Yeah.
Their legs are shot. I know some guys that their legs are just black from sitting.
Yeah, the miles
on awful seats. But it's
Is it a social issue? Like, are we actually that bad as a human that we don't recognize what these people did for us? Basically, every single thing that we see around us, these big buildings and the planes and the rails and trucks, cars, well, these are the people who actually played a very initial role in moving that stuff around the continent, right? Now, are we just as a human being ignoring their efforts, or we haven't been told that what these guys do?
I think a lot of people just look out the window and think that grew there, that building just, one day it wasn't there and the next day it was, and they don't realize all the efforts, even all the guys that brought that steel in from the coast, or all those guys that brought all the brick in, or and I worked for the Fergus Truck Show for 20 years, and the slogan at the truck show was, if you got it, a truck brought it. And it's honestly
Just the
truth.
biggest
It's-
truth. Yeah.
It's there's not a single thing in this room that wasn't on a truck at one point in time.
I agree. But I mean, no, but it's still, all these people, I know these people personally. Actually, I was trained by some of these people as well when I got into this. And, of course, they have these stories that sometimes you don't believe them sometimes, but they're true. Majority of them are true. But at the same time, they suffered with mental health, physical health, whole bunch of stuff, family life. But these people have never been acknowledged. Like somebody went on a war, yes, their service is there.
Right.
They got the acknowledgement. Like there's a doctor in town that was very good to the people. There's probably a street named after that doctor, right? There is a good teacher in town. There's probably a street named after this teacher, right? But truck drivers, who cares?
Or it's that asshole that lives down the street with the truck.
Mad,
you know what I mean?
Mad truck driver, always grumpy,
Yeah. I don't know. In the community, I think a lot of guys in the community respect them, but like outside of the community, I know plenty of people that have absolutely no idea what I do or did for a living, and when you start to talk about it, like their mind's blown that you would leave for a week or two at a time, or a month, or and especially back in the the 90s and stuff like that, like cell phones weren't
you leave your house,
right,
and you have no sense what your family is doing, or like what kind of shape they're in.
You call home once a week just to make sure everybody's alive. I had a pager. That was my my first technologically advanced item that it made my life a lot easier. But like even back then, these guys would, looking for work and stuff like that, they wouldn't know when dispatch had a load for them. They'd have to phone in on a payphone and figure it out,
Yeah.
But yeah, these guys, I don't think a lot of them got the respect they deserve. But at the same time, those guys never demanded respect either.
Isn't that wrong though? Like I got quite a rebellious mindset here, in a way that I think, like, somebody had to take a stance. Like somebody had to say, come on, like what we do here. Even trucking companies did not acknowledge them in some way, like did not run such campaigns or such educational program where they could go to the public and tell them what these guys do and kind of suffering they do.
Yeah.
Even government failed.
Yeah, the government failed. I mean, what a surprise. And these guys were literally the lifeblood of everything and anything around us, and people treated them like shit, They the scourge of the universe. They got pushed into truck stops, and they got, you're not allowed to go. I still to this day, if I stop for lunch somewhere, I'll have somebody say to me, do you think you should park there? Well, do you think I'm not allowed to have lunch? Like it's
Yeah.
it's but yeah, those guys, they had a hard life, and there wasn't the social programs back then to fall back on for them too, like benefits. There was benefits. They didn't have benefits programs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not that a truck driver will ever use a benefit program. These guys here, even these guys today, they suffer from mental health. My kids here, they just lost a friend here 2 nights ago. And these guys don't realize, yeah, times are bad now, but they don't think about what they're leaving behind too.
Yeah.
And if these guys would just go and use these benefits that they have, therapy's a real thing.
Yeah, I agree. No, but I mean, if you haven't been told there's such service for you or such help for you, sometimes I feel like they're not even, like, a lot of people don't even realize. And there's also, like, you, and I don't know if it's just a male problem or no, like you're hesitant to open up.
Well, I agree, but in the same time, I think truck drivers are a whole other level. These guys here, if you turn to one guy and said, I went to the chiropractor yesterday, they'll make fun of you
Yeah.
for the rest of the day because,
Exactly.
how's your back?
Yeah.
It just won't end, and the second you give another truck driver, you show a bit of weakness, you're in trouble, right? Because there's going to be 8 guys piling on top of you, And I know guys that got nicknames 30 years ago from something stupid they said.
My finger hurts.
Yeah, my finger hurts, and that guy will be known as Finger for the rest of his life. Like it's just, it's comical. The guys have a lot of fun, but at the same time, it's a man's sport.
Yeah.
And
But there's a lot of females in there too. In my last show, I had one of the representative of one of the associations that represent women in trucking, and I had a great show, and I was very impressed with the kind of work they do. Yeah, so it's very diverse now. Jeff, so how many types of hauling have you done? So other than the flatbed,
I hauled a van for a little bit at the very beginning, and then I hauled flatbed for the rest of it.
right? So you haven't tried cattle.
Haven't hauled cattle.
Yeah.
Haven't done trains.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand trains. I think like anybody who hauls trains is a lunatic. So yeah, it's basically been vans and various flatbeds, multi-axle, tandems, spreads. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
How would you? Let's have you do a little bit of comparison of local work and long haul. Pros and cons.
Pros and cons. I mean, there is a real nice feeling of waking up in the morning and knowing that you have 13 hours of driving to do today, and you don't have to answer the phone. You don't have to talk to anybody. You don't have to. All you're worrying about is what you're having for lunch and dinner. But on the flip side, I sleep in my own bed every night now.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot better relationship with my kids than I ever did when they were growing up. And that's not their fault, but it's the industry had a lot to do with it. It's when a guy leaves on a Sunday night at 5:00 and I'll see you next week, like it's just, it's not very conducive to a family life. That's for sure. One of the hardest things for me to figure out when I came off the road to do what I'm doing now was, what do people do after work?
Mm-hmm.
Because I had no idea what people do after work. There was no after work. Right? Like,
but I know you're a musician. Like you.
Yeah, but that was a former life,
No, but come on. Don't tell me this.
It was a former life.
Jeff, let me tell you. People who have arts in them, it never leaves them.
Well,
because they, like arts is something, any type of art, you don't make it.
Yeah.
You come with it.
Music,
and it leaves with you.
Yeah. Music became photography for me. Photography I could take with me on the road.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been doing that for a long time now. And it kind of comes and goes. It's one of those things where it's an interest and a hobby, and I've made money at it, but yeah, it's it took me a long time to figure out, like, people don't realize that when you've spent the last 15 hours, 18
Yes.
hours, 20 hours
Correct.
trying to get from point A to point B during the day,
Mm-hmm.
and when you pull into that truck stop on a Wednesday night,
Yeah.
the only two you're worried about: a shower, food, and bed.
That's it. That's all you want.
That's it, so like but now when I get home on a Wednesday night, I'm like, for the first year, I was like, what the fuck do I do now? Because I had no idea, So yeah, people laugh when I say it, but it took me a while to figure out what people do after work.
Trucking takes away your life skills. Sometimes I believe I meet people that were extremely good before they got into trucking in terms of public and people.
Yeah.
But when they drove for such long time, they actually did not have the best of the social skills.
So back when I was playing music,
Mm-hmm.
they would literally pay me to be the life of the party,
Mm-hmm.
And I literally decided one weekend that I was going to quit and start driving truck.
Mm-hmm.
And like 2 months later, I played my last show. And that following Monday, I started at Markel. So I went from being in front of
Public audience.
a
Yeah.
lot of people
Yeah.
to like locked in
Yeah.
a truck in a closet all by myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, you went from an extrovert to an introvert rather quickly. But I don't know. Yeah, it's quite interesting to see some of the guys that we have in this industry that there's guys that use this industry to hide from people.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
There's guys that you couldn't hide. It's all walks of life. It really is. It's crazy what this industry includes. But it's
Did you ever feel you were in the wrong business when you were driving? Because a person who is used to singing in front of the audience, and then all of a sudden you have to be alone for days. You ever feel that what have I done to myself?
No, I mean, at the time, when I first started driving, I had other reasons that I decided to start driving. And I realized that, playing music was I was having a lot of fun,
Mm-hmm.
but I was never going to make a living at it.
Correct. Yeah, that's
So it was time to grow up and figure out
Mhm.
something else to do. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I had a lot of fun doing it. And I've had a lot of fun trucking too over the years. I've met a lot of great people and done a lot of cool things and saw a lot of sunsets through a windshield and
what are the cool things?
well, there's running to the coast or running down into Texas or I used to run to Florida all the time. So, it'd be January at home and I'd be wearing shorts on a Thursday, like it's
It is something.
yeah. We hauled some pretty cool stuff over the years, a lot of steel, but like into a lot of different plants and stuff like that, stuff that's underground
Mhm.
and U.S. military stuff. Just as a truck driver, you get to see a lot of things that a lot of people don't get to see.
I
The
agree.
behind the scenes stuff,
Yes.
that
Confidential.
yeah. When I was working for one company in town here, we used to do trade shows. So we'd go to like, the trade shows are never in some shithole. They're in New Orleans or
Yeah.
some really cool towns,
Yeah.
So, and the deal was that you got there on a Thursday and they unloaded you and then they paid you to hang out until the Sunday when the show was over. So
Mhm.
you got to like play tours for a couple days and
Right.
stuff like that,
Yeah.
Yeah, some neat stuff.
So what's the coolest thing about trucking in your opinion?
You're your own boss. Even the company guys that are running company trucks, like they make their own decisions,
In terms of planning and
planning and when their lunch is and and if you want to sit and eat a box of Oreos for dinner, no one's gonna yell at you for eating a box of Oreos for dinner, There's some real benefits to the industry. There's some really good money to be made still. But at the same time, it's one of those industries that once you're in, it's really hard to get out.
So explain this to me. So you said once you get into trucking, you can't leave?
You have a really hard time getting out because what ends up happening is these guys acquire bills that require big money.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everybody goes out and buys a brand new pickup truck and
Oh,
buys
okay.
a, you know,
So your lifestyle goes up.
yeah.
Now you can't go down.
And all of a sudden,
Yeah.
you know, you can't leave trucking because there isn't another job that you're going to be able to get.
It's true. So nothing matches the paycheck.
Nothing matches the paycheck,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So once you're in, you have a really hard time getting out.
Have you thought of leaving at all?
I kind of did. Like 4 years ago after COVID, I'd had enough. COVID was a shit show. It ruined friendships. Ever since COVID happened, politics are way more prevalent. You know, people are judged basically on their on who they voted for now, you know. I don't think the industry is anywhere near as relaxed as what it was in 2019.
What do you mean when you say relaxed?
I honestly think that people, you know, they didn't really care as much about politics or about about skin color or about where people came from.
So you think people went cuckoo? Like people just started?
I don't know what it is. I really don't know what it is, but it's.
I agree with you.
Yeah,
I agree with you. People are more opinionative. They consume more of the social media, even though this is going on social media too. But like people lifestyle did change
100%.
And then like I also say that in this day and age, if you haven't done your own personal research or somewhat education, the flood of information in the phone can really mislead you.
Right.
In many aspects. And yes, you're right. COVID did bring people to the point where the consumption of this sort of entertainment went up.
Oh, 100%. People lived on their phones back then.
Right.
If you weren't a truck driver, a lot of people I know just sat at home and watched Netflix or YouTube for months at a time, Meanwhile, we were trapped in cages at shippers because they wouldn't let us use the bathroom.
Yeah.
You
suffered that?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Did you find that disrespectful?
I still do. I still have places that I go to this day that still have the cages up and still have signs saying, truck drivers are not allowed to use the bathroom.
This is so, I know these places, and this is so sad.
It
is, again, back to the point, all these big buildings and whatever you see around you is, of course, there's engineers and policymakers and lawmakers and all that people, but the people on the ground, the ones that are moving this stuff, and then you put them in a cage and say you can't use the washroom, that's gotta be crazy.
And it's just simple stuff. We're just human beings, you know what I mean? And I know guys that got in trouble for going out and take a leak in the parking lot of the place that they were trying. But what's the other option?
Yeah.
You won't let me in the building.
Yeah.
Right.
So you can't even do that freely now because it's cameras all over the place.
Right. Yeah. COVID was a shit show. And for the guys that were cross border at the time, we'd come here. And I mean, I don't want to get into politics or what Canada did right or wrong, but our numbers were a lot lower than everybody else. It's proven fact.
True, this is true.
But we'd leave here and we'd cross the border, and it was just the wild, wild west.
Yeah.
It was just another day of the week down there. I remember back in 22, I talked to one kid, and he had COVID, and he had tested and had COVID 6 times. Right, and I mean, he was a young, healthy guy. It wasn't really slowing him down at all. But in the same breath, then he tells me that, I lost my grandmother to COVID last year. And it was just maybe we should do something about this,
Yeah.
So I don't know. It was definitely a very interesting time. But when COVID ended, I made probably about as much money as I ever did during COVID in the trucking industry. But you couldn't go on vacation.
Yep.
You couldn't spend it anywhere.
Right.
And when COVID finally wrapped up, I was burnt out. It was done. It was time for me to figure something else out. So
And you thought about leaving trucking?
I thought about leaving trucking. I thought about going to drive a dump truck, or
Mhm.
I don't think I'd ever be able to leave trucking, and as the industry goes, but like there's a lot of different aspects of trucking that and I settled on what I'm doing now, P&D delivery company, and
And explain to me, like local deliveries?
local deliveries. Yeah. So, I start at 6:30 in the morning, and if I'm not done at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, that's a long day,
Really?
and
And you make good money?
good money, really
Yeah.
good money.
Do you want to throw some number at that? Like general.
Like 95, 100 a year, you know, 5 days a week, no nights, no evenings.
Wow.
The reason that they got me to sign in the first place was, I haven't been in Toronto in 4 years.
You have not been in Toronto.
No, we don't go. I mean, we don't go east of Guelph line.
Which is Milton, almost.
Yeah, which is Milton.
Yeah.
So I haven't been to. I've been to Toronto, but it's been to concerts and stuff. It's not. I haven't been there for work, and
That makes me feel jealous.
I
Because your work.
You're right. I was
As a-
humming and hawing about doing this job, and then all of a sudden, when they told me that, I'm like,
Yeah.
sign me up. So
Because trucking is 1,000 times more difficult when you go past Milton
Right.
from the west.
yeah,
Like we are on the western side of Toronto.
yeah.
Yeah.
When you hit
Yeah.
Milton, you're in for it's
Yeah.
it's about to get real.
Yeah, your brain is gonna be functioning
Yeah.
differently.
So we go down to the lake. One way we go as far north as Listowel and as far west as like Woodstock, Ingersoll. And
Yeah,
that's
would you recommend somebody getting into trucking? Like a young person asks you, should I get into trucking? Would you say yes or no?
Yeah, I would. But I would also want that person to walk into it with their eyes wide open.
What do you mean by that?
Know what you're getting into.
Hmm.
Know that that logbook says that you're only going to work 13 hours a day, but you're going to
How are you gonna know if you're not in? Like,
Right.
a lot of people believe that trucking is just sitting on a seat, driving, and it's fun. You play the music, and life is good.
I tried to convince Jarrett.
Yeah.
I tried to talk him out of
And
it.
that's your son?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tried to talk him out of it. And he listened. He did. And he still went through with it. And I'm happy he did.
Hang on a second. So your son is also a truck driver.
Yeah.
Your son, when he asked you, you sort of convinced him not to get into trucking?
I tried to.
Okay, why? Tell me why.
I didn't want him to deal with the divorce, deal with the never seeing your kids. There's a whole lot more. There's a whole lot more to this industry than just trucking. People talk about steering wheel holders and they talk about truck drivers and they almost wear it like a badge of honor that they've done this and they've done that. And I'll tell you, it took me a long time to figure it out. But it's the people you leave behind
This is very, very interesting.
is the reason that you're doing this.
Mhm.
I've driven some cool trucks. I've done some cool jobs. But at the end of the day, it was, you're just trying to get back home is all you're trying to do, And it took me a long time to figure that out, My kids, they definitely paid the price for what I did for a living. And that's kind of why I tried to talk Jared out of it too, because I didn't want him to have to do what I did. And he's doing it, and he's doing a fantastic job. He's a great kid. I got 3 boys, and every single one of them was fantastic. My youngest, Jordan, he's trying to become a diesel mechanic. They're all kind of tied into the industry in a way. The middle one, he runs an excavator, but he loads dump trucks all day long. They're all kind of around trucks all the time, and they're 3 fantastic human beings. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't wish what I did back then on them ever.
And so explain that to me. So a lot of people don't understand what you're saying. Like, I know it's a tough job. You're going away from your family, but that's not the only thing.
There's no respect. There's no respect. It's, getting back to what we were talking about the old guys, about how they were never respected. There's just no respect for anybody, whether it's his first day or his last day. It's a really, really weird industry in that it's one of the only jobs in the world that, like, if you go and start at a new company, there could be you could be driving for 30 years and there could be a guy that's been there for 2 years. He's only got 2 years experience, but he's getting paid more than you are because he's been there longer.
Correct.
You know, like it's such a goofy industry where your resume doesn't really mean anything at the end of the day.
Mm.
And I'm fine with that. But you know, there's all those 3 o'clock in the morning deliveries and sleepless nights and waking up in the middle of nowhere and trying to remember where you are.
Oh.
I don't know how many times I did that. Had to,
And you're not the only one.
yeah, you
You're
know,
not the only one. Like, you're so tired that you wake up and you're like,
what town am I in?
yeah, where am I? Yeah.
You know, and eating garbage. You know, like just
Because you need nutritions.
but not only do you need something to eat, like you need something to eat and you need to get it in you in the next 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to go have your shower because the clock's ticking.
Yeah.
And you're only, you know, I mean, the new logbook changed a lot of things. Some of it for the worse, some of it for good. But at least, you know, at least these guys are supposedly getting 10 hours of sleep a night now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but like 20 years ago,
Nope.
you know,
We all ran to do things.
we all ran loose leaf logbooks for a reason.
Mhm.
You know, you go through 3 or 4 pages in a day. You know, you'd move everything ahead and then move it back and, you know, adjust it to whatever you needed it to be.
Mhm.
But the guy who paid the price at the end of the day was the truck driver because at the end of the day, he was going to bed for 4 hours. If he was lucky, you know? And I don't, I just would really love for some of these guys to realize that and maybe go have a normal life doing something else.
But you can't, because, see, a lot of people can make an argument saying, "Oh, this is not the only job that keeps you away from home." You know, let's say you can be like, let's say you're in the army and then you go away for a while, right? But the thing is, in trucking, people do not retire.
No.
It is such an addiction.
And that's exactly what it is. It's an addiction. And once you're in, that's the other thing is you know, once you're in, you can't get out. You know, it's the money, but it's also the trucks. Like
Yeah.
it's this whole thing where like you fall in love with it, you know,
Obsession.
and you know, on one hand we're going, yeah, we're waking up in a town that we have no idea where we are. But you know what? You're waking up in a town you've never been at before too, and it's kind of cool to be there, you know? Don't get me wrong. You know, I think that it's a fantastic career, but I think that these guys get in and some of them struggle to get back out. Some of them realize that, you know, when it's too late, that it's not for them. You know, I just think, you know, whether we should have a ride-along program or something, you know what I mean, for these guys to spend a week.
Mhm.
I've taken a couple different guys out that were thinking about doing it and took them out for a week and, you know, and I think I've done it with 4 different guys and 2 of the guys ended up getting their license and 2 of the guys said, you guys
Too
are
much?
lunatics, you
Yeah.
know, like this is, you know, it's a really weird industry.
I think trucking, so this is my saying. My thinking is trucking is a great trade if you do it right. But it takes a very long time you to understand that how to do it right.
Yeah. Yeah, and it takes and the thing is that, you know, the guy that's been doing it for 2 years thinks he's doing it right.
Yeah.
He doesn't realize that there's way more to this than what, you know. I don't know. And it's also the guys that, once again, it's the guys that you're surrounded by.
Yeah.
You know. You
Mentors.
yeah, your mentors. If you learn from guys who have put the time in are the last, like the guys that I learned from, they literally were the last cowboys, and they made it back then. They made it sound like it was the greatest thing in the world, and I mean, it's been a lot of fun, but it isn't the party that it once was back then either. Those guys had a good time.
Well, enforcement wasn't there, but then like again, when there's not enough enforcement, and then they were doing things they were not supposed to, when bad things happen, right? When bad things happen, then ultimately enforcement is more, right?
Yeah.
And then gradually the culture changes. Of course, it takes a very long time. And now we are to the point where I think things are much safer, much better in many ways. But overall, the public view needs to be changed. That's what my struggle is.
I agree. And a lot of people blame a certain group of people in this industry.
People from mainly Brampton or people from Indian descent, and like there's a whole bunch of social media campaigns and whatnot. That's another topic. So see, Jeff, you said to me that you did not want your son to be a truck driver, right? And you explained the reasons too, right?
Yeah.
Fair enough. I know too many people that have said the exact same thing to me. They said it's a great career. I had a great life, but it was not easy. It was tough.
It was
Hence,
tough.
I don't want my kids to get into this.
Right.
And I do ask this question. But when, like somebody who's done trucking for many decades does not want their kids to get into this, then there's a vacuum, right? Now somebody needs to fill that vacuum. And then we live in Canada. There's a whole bunch of immigrants coming into the country. When an immigrant comes to the country, they're looking for some job that they can make the most money for the establishment purposes, right? Now, what they get into is trucking. And then once they get into trucking, sometimes, I'm not saying all of them are bad. Sometimes they do fine, no problem. But sometimes, it takes them some time to adopt the culture, right?
Right.
And then there is the struggle. And then, like you go on social media and see hate and discrimination and
racism,
like varies. Yes, exactly. Truck stops are like there's two groups on truck stops. You go to an on route on the 401, there's two kinds of truck drivers. There's this group and that group, and this group hates this group, and this group hates this group, and they never communicate. And that they have no sense what is this person going through and what is this person going through.
I have about 20 immigrants that I work with every day. And it took me a long time to figure out that, what, I ended up realizing that I need to judge people just on each individual. If you're an asshole, you're an asshole.
Correct. I don't come from a culture.
No.
Yeah.
But some of these guys that I work with every day, they're fantastic human beings. And let's be honest, over the years, I've seen just as many white guys upside down in the ditch as I've seen brown guys.
Yeah, I agree.
One of the first memories that I have though about a really, really racist moment was I was in West Virginia when 9/11 happened.
Oh, okay. Tell me about it.
Yeah. And
living alone?
I was on my way south.
Right.
And we were, everybody got jammed into these truck stops because they tried to shut everything down.
Like the whole country?
The whole country down,
okay.
Yeah. And I remember there's a couple of brown guys in the parking lot and like
terrified.
Oh, they were terrified.
Wow.
Right, because these guys were looking for blood. And this was hours after it happened.
Like even though no conclusion,
they had no conclusions. But you point fingers, right? And yeah, it was
sad.
It was that was a wild day. It was
Were they being questioned?
Oh yeah, they were ready to go over and have a talk with them because they somehow thought that these guys were involved in it. Like, and these guys are they're just truck drivers, they're just like, but yeah, I think, I don't think that people realize that without our immigrant truck drivers in this country, that the shelves would literally be bare.
But you know how many people think like that?
Yeah.
Not many.
No, not many. But like
that's a very special thought.
Yeah.
A lot of people think they shouldn't be here. They're here to kill us. They
But I have no idea what percentage in Canada now that we have as far as truck
I don't
drivers
want to
go.
throw any numbers out too,
Yeah.
but it's not 50-50, I tell you this. It's way less than 50.
Yeah. But
But-
even if you took 25 or 30% of these guys
Perhaps.
off the road, you
Yeah.
know, like it would be devastating to the stores.
And then the other thing is there are not many people that are, like there's not many people want to get into trucking.
No.
Like, I ask people this question all the time that how did you get into trucking? And they do always talk about some sort of opposition from the family that you're not going to do trucking. Only
Yeah.
because, and I think Hollywood has played some role in there too. Like some of the movies I watched, they portray truck drivers as protagonists.
Outlaws.
Like
Yeah.
outlaws or
Yeah.
kidnappers or
Yeah.
bad people.
Eastbound and down.
Yeah.
We're going to get some Coors. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's just a job.
Yeah.
It's just a job. And everybody's out there for a different reason,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And my reason ended up later on in my life, being there was a point in time where it was all about the trucks.
Mm-hmm.
But then it ended up being I just want to get home.
Have you had any close calls?
Uh
Or anything bad that happened to you on the road?
You know what? I've been very lucky over the years. I've had a couple fender benders and stuff like that, but I've never had anything that was life threatening. I've never had a load shift. I've never had a load. Well, I mean that's not true either. Every flatbedder out there knows that you're going to have loads that shift. It's
Do you want to explain people what that is? For those who don't
sometimes you get something on a trailer that just doesn't want to stay on the trailer.
know. Mm-hmm.
It just
You can tie it all you want.
doesn't matter how many straps, how many chains you throw over top of something.
Yeah.
It just wants to walk itself off the edge of the trailer. So one of the things that I found that especially for a flatbedder, but it applies to everybody in the industry, that sometimes you got to be able to think outside of the box, and you got to figure out. There still is a lot of this industry where it's you're on your own,
Right.
and you have to figure out how to solve these problems between Monday
the
and
second
Friday.
you left the yard,
Yeah,
they have no backup.
Yeah, it's you.
Yeah.
So, in a situation where you have a piece of steel or something, it's usually bar that you can't keep on the trailer.
Mm-hmm.
You got to figure out how to. Ratchet binders are a great invention. You can pull a lot of stuff around with a ratchet binder.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I probably the worst I ever did was I broke my wrist I had a bar snap back at me and broke my wrist. And
Nothing on the road?
on the road.
No, nothing like in terms of traffic.
No, like
so that's big. If you drive for 30 years and you haven't done, you've been able to keep yourself safe.
yeah,
I think you deserve some sort of recognition for
I
that too.
don't have anything that jumps out. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like I don't have any story about
Good. That's good.
It's
that's big.
Yeah, and I'm proud of that too. Like I'm happy with that. It's but every day I see guys too that have stories to tell,
But here's the thing, Jeff. Out of all the trucks on the road, the last one you want to be behind is flatbed. One, I preach people that just keep away from trucks. But especially if you see a flatbed, just try not to drive behind it. Because I'm not saying their stuff is not safe or secure, but what I'm saying is humans. Anything can happen any second.
Yeah, but in the same breath, you're given a lot of leeway to that 1/4 inch of plywood and that skin of aluminum on the side of that trailer. From at least the stuff on a flatbed's tied down.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff in a van,
Yeah.
it's just laying in there.
True.
And I've seen guys haul coils in vans that they just put them on the floor. Skidded coils. They just set them on the floor. And
See, I don't the problem with van is you don't know what's inside, right?
one of the very first gigs that I did was we used to haul aluminum ingots out of Alcoa here
Mm-hmm.
to Chicago or to Milwaukee. Sorry.
Mhm.
And, they'd load us right they'd literally scale us and load us right as heavy can be, and you'd be leaving from Milwaukee and they'd have these they weren't on skids because of the way that they made the ingot, it would kind of self-stood, but they'd stack them all, they all intertwined on top of each other. And there'd be stacks of these ingots that were 5 feet tall, and they'd block the bottoms in with 2x4s, right? Like that was how they, there was no, and straps, like straps, the track systems on the walls inside vans that didn't exist that back then. You couldn't strap anything down on the inside of a van, So like it was a different thing, So yeah, I'll take a flatbed any day. I don't mind these vans that I haul around now, but and it's funny because in our building, like we do have flatbeds too. And the second that there's a flatbed delivery come in, they come in. I'm the first person they ask
because they know you've done it, right?
Yeah. So
Jeff, what's the funniest thing you've seen on the road? I'm sure you've seen a lot in 30 years. That's a very long time.
Yeah, I PG or
PG doesn't matter. It's an open show. Just tell me what have you seen that made you laugh or something you still think about. Like that.
I've seen the guys running scams out behind the trailers and stuff like that. I witnessed with my own 2 eyes one day this guy that was talking about he had just won it big at the casino down the street, and he was wanting to give away the money.
Right.
Which ended up with guys just getting completely robbed, but back then too, it was there was no credit cards, there was no debit cards, there was no cell phones, so like everybody in the truck stop paid for their fuel for the whole week with cash. So these guys were walking around with $1,500, $2,000 in their pocket, and everybody knew it.
Wow.
So these guys would pull these scams on guys or just straight up beat them up, But funny, like, I don't know. There's been a lot of my ex-father-in-law was a character. He would he could make a room laugh, I don't know. Some of the best nights I ever had though were like you get running late at night and you'd find somebody on the CB who was a comedian, was good at telling jokes or could sing or and you'd be going down the road and there'd be a pack of a convoy of 10 guys all running together just listening to this one guy tell jokes all night.
That culture is not there anymore, right?
It's not there anymore. The CB is I wish that guys would still use it. I'm constantly telling Jarrett, like, if the weather's bad, turn it on.
Yeah, it does help you.
Because, that pileup just this past week in Michigan,
50 trucks,
if these guys had CBs on, I'm sure the guys going the other way were yelling at them to stop.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as far as the safety feature goes, when the weather's shit outside, I still think these guys should be running them. But I understand why it went by the wayside too. You can pick up the phone and call all your friends and all your family.
Yeah, and then CB has become like a botheration that I'm on the phone and that there's a stupid person talking about something, and then
and the first you just reach up, turn it off. Yeah,
there's no need. Yeah,
there. We used to run really hot CBs. We'd have amplifiers and they'd be all boosted and
I know that stuff. Yeah,
and and now it's just like there's no point in it anymore. I haven't ran a CB in a long time, but I'm sure some of these guys don't even have CBs that are long hauling
at all. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, there's no point in it.
Yeah, some people don't. Yeah, Jeff, what's the most horrifying thing you've seen on the road? Something that you wish you had not.
Some wild accidents, people killed. Yeah, when you're driving, and they get you down to one lane and you're driving past an accident and they got the tarps out.
Yeah,
when they're covering up bodies and stuff like that. Or you're driving past something that burnt and you can smell it, like it's I've seen some horrifying accidents and stuff like that.
What's the one that you still remember?
Yeah, down in Atlanta, I saw a bad one on the south end down there, and it was I found out later on that it was a mother and dad and 2 kids, and the car burnt and they never got out, and it's just, that one stuck with me. It's you can only drive these machines for so long before there's a problem with them,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully it isn't a devastating problem. I've known guys that were sleeping and woke up and the truck was on fire, and they're trapped in the bunk. You know what I mean? Some of them got out, one of them didn't. I've had buddies that have had heart attacks and die in truck stops and in their bunk.
Found many days. Yeah.
Found a couple days later. Yeah, you're on your own.
It's not. See, it's not easy. It's not easy when people are trucking outside, and at the same time they're facing this, negativity and a whole bunch of negative stuff about them, right? And then people are giving their lives to deliver this stuff. That we go.
They really are giving their lives, and people.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like, they're not respected, and they're out there literally giving their lives for, to make sure that your kid
Society.
for you make sure your kid has
For
diapers.
a proper supply chain.
Yeah, and they're gone from home for months at a time. Some of them, I had a buddy of mine who he was an ice road trucker, and those guys, man, those guys are built of different stuff than I am.
No, I agree.
It's but they would start in October and they wouldn't get home until June. And it's just and like they have some cool stories to tell, but nobody knows the bullshit they went through too.
Yes,
nobody understands the 3 o'clock in the morning stuff, and you never get a normal sleep anymore. And and I was one of the lucky ones that I actually slept better in the truck than I did at home.
Yeah, some people are like that. Yeah, they enjoy sleeping in the truck. It's actually, in some cases, a pleasure sleeping in the truck. In some cases, right? It depends on the truck and depends on the load. Two factors to it.
Yeah. Well, then we go right back to those cattle haulers, because that load's walking around on you all night long. I don't understand how that works.
You don't want them parked beside you.
I don't. Yeah. Yeah, you wake up at 3 a.m. with
because
cows
they're
moving
very
beside
loud
you.
in the morning.
It's ridiculous. I don't know. Those guys, man,
but that stuff got to deliver too,
Yeah.
So we all have our own job to do. So it's it takes a lot.
It's incredible the amount of stuff that goes on in the back of one of these trucks.
Right.
It really is. And it's incredible that some of the men that do this job for a living, and they do deserve a lot of respect. They do deserve more than that they're given.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them, I don't think, back to that mental health thing.
Yeah.
I don't think that their family even understands.
They don't. No, I agree.
What
Nobody understands what truck drivers go through. And then I think that is partially the reason they don't even get the kind of support they need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they don't, there's that whole thing too, where they don't want to, they have a benefits package. Well,
but the company drivers, now owner operators don't even enjoy that.
Yeah. But like even the company drivers, like, if these guys were to do therapy for something, you know what I mean? Like they just get ridiculed till the end of time.
You can't talk about it.
Yeah. But like even their families, they don't understand what happens between when they leave on a Sunday and get home on a Saturday, and they walk in the door on a Friday night and where the fuck you been? Like it's you're late. You were supposed to be here at noon and it's 3 o'clock, like.
And you can't even explain things were beyond my control.
Yeah, there's an accident, or it's just like it's when you first start doing this job, I find you're really rammy, you're really go,
Mm-hmm.
and then as you get older in the industry, you realize that like there's no
point.
There's no point.
You're not going anywhere.
Just like relax, let the day unfold, because you can. Any plan that you ever make is never going to work. It's never going to work the way you think it's going to work, right?
Jeff, last thing I want to talk to you about is the roads. What is something that bothers you a lot and you really wish you could talk to the people and tell them, car drivers didn't do this?
Well, I don't necessarily think it's a problem with the car drivers. I think it's has a lot to do with the fact that you can leave here and head for Windsor, and on a good day, you see one OPP officer. Enforcement, right? You'll have people passing you doing 140, 150 kilometers an hour, and they're out there doing it for the reason that they're going to get away with it. They know that they're going to get away with it. Yeah, there's plenty of idiots out there, but the thing is those idiots are, when all you're concentrating on is cars going past you all day long, you're going to see, if you have 1,000 cars drive past you in a day, two of those guys are going to be idiots,
Correct.
So it's just a game of numbers, really. As far as like what they should be changing, I don't know. One of the big things I find right now is people driving without their taillights on in the morning, right? Because the automatic headlights came on, but for some reason the taillights don't come on. I don't understand why.
Yeah, it's different cars.
Right? Yeah. So you'll see people driving down the road and all of a sudden there's a car in front of you and there's no taillights on, but they have headlights, So I guess it's the daytime running lights would be what's on, It's goofy stuff. People can figure out how to do things that you just shake your head at. You have no idea how they managed to do what they just did,
Yeah.
People jumping off the median and trying to turn around in the middle and getting stuck,
Yeah.
They don't realize how dangerous it is.
Correct.
I've literally seen people walking across the 401, walking across the multi-lane highways, and it's just like, what
Stuff like that.
Yeah,
like,
what are you
how do I
trying to
teach you
do?
this?
Yeah. But then it boils down to is that, the same thing that you were saying before about trucks, like, don't drive beside a truck.
Yeah.
Don't try to get past us as quick as you can. Give these guys a wide berth. The mirrors are a lot better now than what they ever were, but at the same time, there's still blind spots all over the place. And accidents happen. One of these super singles blows up on a truck, like it'll knock
a lot of things. And super singles,
it'll blow the glass right out of the side of a car.
What's a super single?
Those are the big single tires, right?
Just for the public.
Yeah. The ones that look like NASCAR tires, they're great tires. They're tough as hell.
Correct. Yes.
But yeah, when one of those blows up, like it'll do a lot of damage.
It would. Yeah. I agree.
And it doesn't necessarily even have to hit you. It's just
there's a lot of force in it.
Yeah.
Right? And then just the way it's built.
Yeah. I've seen it take the windows out of cars.
Wow.
So, and then there's the whole problem of like all a multi-axle truck he'll be grossing out 140. All that weight all of a sudden being released too. Like it's
a lot of things can happen. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
safety should be taught on a very large scale on the roads.
But it should also be included on the G license side too.
Yeah, but there isn't much. Like, I don't want to be like too critical to the government here, but there's a lot of things. The ministry standards need to be a bit higher, especially for the commercial, like towards how to be around commercial vehicles.
Right, and like as far as the industry goes, on the commercial side. We just had another school busted, for just being a license mill. You know what I mean? And I don't think the police are policing the police, if you know what I mean.
I do exactly know what you mean.
I think that there's a lot of drivers in this industry that got their license, for lack of a better word, out of a Cracker Jack box. And, some of these guys, apparently they learn along the way, because some of these guys will have a flawless career, but the next guy won't,
That is the problem. I mean, yeah. It's like it's a whole different topic about truck training. And then my belief is it's the mindset. So the best thing you can give somebody is the safe mindset, and safe mindset starts with your own family. And like when you look at your family and you think about your family and think that I don't want any vehicle to harm them, right? And then you think this other way around, that you want to make sure you don't harm any other vehicle, right? And that is the mindset that tells you to back off and be safe and do it slowly and securely.
Right.
Yeah.
And that whole back off thing, I think that's just a maturity thing.
Yeah.
You'll have somebody passing, you'll
Mhm.
you'll try to race them, you know what I mean? And stuff like that. And it's just like you're not you're and they don't realize it too from their side. They're trying to save 15 seconds. You know what I mean? And they're taking their life into their own hands. But from the truck driver's point of view too, like it's a maturity thing where you need to slow down and you need to plan ahead and if you need to be at Chicago for 8 a.m. on a Monday morning, well, you need to leave Sunday morning, not Sunday afternoon. Like it's
trip planning.
trip planning is it's not, young men do not trip plan very well. And I was one of them,
I think trucking, you learn as you spend more time in trucking, but your perspective does change.
Yeah, 100%.
Over time. You develop as a trucker, and it's a whole revolution,
And your priorities change too.
Priorities change,
it's you suddenly realize what's important
and what's not.
and what's not.
Well said, Jeff.
Yeah.
Jeff, I want to thank you for being on the show.
No problem.
And we'll see you guys next Sunday. Bye-bye till then.